The wall might be with us forever. The wall has taken up a permanent place in our politics. The Trump wall is not going to be built on the southern border. Everyone knows that. Republicans in Congress are already telling reporters they know there will be no money for the wall in the budget bill next week that will prevent the next government shutdown. And as one Republican senator said today, he expects the president to be reasonable, that was his word, reasonable, and sign that bill with no funding for the wall. But it seems like the wall that will never be built will continue to be used by Republicans to explain every bad thing that happens in America. Yesterday, the House Judiciary Committee had its first hearing on gun safety regulations in 10 years. The bill under consideration, H.R. 8, would require background checks for all gun sales. Most Republican members of the committee simply boycotted the hearing, but one used his time in the hearing to complain only about the small percentage of our gun violence linked to undocumented residents of this country.
I hope we do not forget the pain and anguish and sense of loss felt by those all over the country who have been the victims of violence at the hands of illegal aliens. H.R. 8 would not have stopped many of the circumstances I raised, but a wall, a barrier on the southern border may have, and that's what we're fighting for.
Mr. Chairman.
Well,
gentlemen will suspend.
The man standing up and protesting there is Manuel Oliver. He will join us in a moment. The man sitting next to him is his friend Fred Guttenberg. He will also join us. Manuel Oliver lost his son, and Fred Guttenberg lost his daughter in the mass murder that killed 17 people at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida almost a year ago. The person who has been charged with the murder of those children and all those other people in Parkland, Florida, is an American citizen who was born here in this country and attended that same high school. A wall on the southern border would not have kept any of those 17 people alive. We are joined now by Manuel Oliver, whose son Joaquin was 17 years old, and Fred Guttenberg, whose daughter Jamie was 14 years old, when America's epidemic of mass murder came to their high school. And I wanted to show you both that moment in the hearing that I'm sure you'll never forget, where Congressman Gaetz pointed at you and basically tried to get you thrown out of the hearing room. We're going to show that to the audience now.
is there a process in the committee whereby if the very same people are repeatedly interrupting the time of the members, that those people will be asked to depart the committee? Or is there...
I will. Excuse me.
Fred, what did that feel like to you to have the congressman point at you, wanting you thrown out of that room?
You know, that congressman showed who he was. I felt like that was democracy at work. You had Manny and I simply not letting him get away with that nonsense. And I want to tell you something about my friend Manny sitting next to me. Because Manny's been in this country for 15 years. He fled Venezuela because of the violence in Venezuela with his family to give them a safe, secure environment in this country. So to have that congressman put his finger out that way, when Manny's son, my daughter, were killed here by an American male, was, from my perspective, the lowest form of political performance. But you know what, Lawrence? Put that sunshine on who these people are, because I think it was good for America to see that he is an example of who has been in charge of doing things regarding gun safety or not doing things. And now we get to see the nonsense that they put behind it.
And Democratic Chairman Jerry Nadler, of course, didn't go along with this crazy notion of having you thrown out of the room. Manny,
No.
let me ask you how it felt for you. I know Fred has been at other hearings. I don't know if you have. We all saw Fred at the Supreme Court confirmation hearing of Justice Kavanaugh when Justice Kavanaugh refused to shake his hand. But Manny, was that your first congressional hearing?
It was. I mean, Fred is a pro when it gets to talking to politicians, and that's not my cup of tea. It's not my field, but I thought that I needed to be there to support Fred and the other parents and the kids. The kids that are actually fighting for their lives and trying to have a better future. So I don't regret being there. I think that my presence there, it's a must. I need to be there. However, now that I'm there, I want to make sure that we don't waste time in there. And this person was totally out of any context that was supposed to be discussed in that room. And that my reaction and Fred's reaction is a reaction of a father. You have to keep in mind that we are still fathers. The fact that Jamie is not here and Joaquin is not here doesn't mean that we're not here. We are here, and we're going to defend our kids forever. So that reaction, any father should be able to understand what we did and what we'll keep on doing as long as we are in this life.
Fred, what do you imagine Congressman Gates would say if the accused mass murderer at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School was an undocumented resident of this country?
Well, if that were true, we would have been guests of the president at the State of the Union. But because the killer of our children was an American male, we were not. But I do want to say that what Congressman Gates did takes the story away from the 40,000 a year who are murdered in this country, the real emergency, 40,000 people a year. And the problem is, while we're sitting here doing this interview, and I've spoken a bit about this lately, in this time frame, somebody is getting the news that their loved one was killed. Somebody right now is planning a funeral for a loved one who was killed that will be happening tomorrow. Somebody just buried a loved one who was killed. It is an epidemic. And when you have a congressman who will put on a political stunt like that rather than dealing with the emergency that is gun violence, it's shameful. And I think if the killer of our children was an undocumented immigrant, which wasn't the case, that isn't typically the case, he would have been having a political field day with it. But it just would be, but it didn't happen that way.
And Manny, I know that the congressman knows who Fred is. Fred has been very prominent out there, and he knows exactly why Fred was at that hearing. I think it'd be pretty easy to figure out, even if he'd never seen you before, why you were sitting beside Fred. The hearings like this always have the parents of victims at these kinds of hearings. The members know that. And so when he's asking to have you thrown out, I know that he knows, and asking to have Fred thrown out, I know he knows. He's trying to throw out someone who lost his daughter at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, and he should have known that you were in exactly the same situation.
But you know what? It doesn't really matter who I am. He made a mistake. Regardless who's sitting there, he made a terrible comment about the actual serious discussion that we were all planning to have. So let's say he didn't know who I was, which doesn't really matter. He made a mistake. He was out of content. And that seems to me that is totally wasting time. He had 5 minutes to make a point. And in 5 minutes, I mean, someone is dying. And this is an emergency, and we have no time, extra time to solve it. By the way, I have to say that Jamie and Joaquin are not here, and we cannot bring them back. But we're doing this for the rest of the kids. And he should know that, because maybe because of what we're doing, his kids will be safe.
Absolutely.
That's our point.
Manuel Oliver and Fred Guttenberg, I am very sorry for your loss. I'm sorry you have to join us under these circumstances, and I'm sorry about what you had to go through in that hearing yesterday. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Lawrence, thank you.
Thank you very much.